Chapter 1. The First Glimpse. Ethan had always considered himself a logical man. He didn't believe in ghosts, omens, or curses, but that changed the night he first saw the shadow. It started as a fleeting movement in his peripheral vision, something dark, shifting unnaturally. At first, he dismissed it as a trick of the light, exhaustion playing with his mind after another late night at the office. But the more he ignored it, the more persistent it became. One evening, as he locked his apartment door, he saw it clearly. A tall, elongated shadow stretched across the hallway floor. Yet nothing was there to cast it. It wasn't his. It wasn't anyone's. And it was moving toward him. He slammed the door shut, his heart pounding. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe he was imagining things. But deep inside, he knew that wasn't true. The shadow was real, and it was watching him. Chapter 2. The Growing Fear. Ethan tried to go about his life as usual, convincing himself it was nothing. But the shadow didn't go away. It followed him. At work, he saw it flickering in the reflections of his monitor. On the subway, it lingered just beyond the closing doors. At home, it loomed in the corners of his bedroom, stretching unnaturally when the lights flickered. Then the nightmares began. Dark figures stood over his bed, whispering words he couldn't understand. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air, convinced something had just been in the room with him. He stopped sleeping, stopped turning off the lights. But nothing helped. The shadow was getting closer. Chapter 3. The Whispering Voice. One night, Ethan was too exhausted to stay awake any longer. He fell into a restless sleep, but this time, he wasn't alone in his dreams. A voice, hollow and distant, whispered his name. Ethan. He opened his eyes. The room was pitch black, the air thick and heavy. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. Sleep paralysis. He had experienced it before, but this was different. From the corner of his vision, the shadow detached itself from the wall. It slithered toward his bed, shifting and twisting unnaturally. "You see me now." Ethan wanted to scream, to bolt upright and run. But he was frozen. The shadow loomed over him, its form flickering like smoke. And then it spoke again. "Let me in." The words weren't heard. They were felt, crawling under his skin, seeping into his mind. A deep primal fear took hold. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the paralysis broke. He gasped for air, his body drenched in cold sweat. The shadow was gone, but the feeling remained. It had spoken to him, and next time, he feared it wouldn't ask for permission. Chapter 4. The Mark. Ethan avoided mirrors after that night. Something told him he wouldn't like what he saw, but curiosity had a way of getting the better of him. That morning, as he was washing his face, he caught a glimpse of his reflection and froze. A dark stain, almost imperceptible, had formed at the edge of his jawline. It looked like a bruise, but it wasn't. It didn't hurt. It didn't fade. And the longer he stared at it, the more it seemed to move, shifting slightly under his skin. Panic gripped him. He scrubbed at it with shaking hands, but it didn't budge. The mark was inside him. That night, the shadow didn't wait for him to sleep. It stood at the foot of his bed, watching, and Ethan, unable to move, unable to breathe, realized the truth. The shadow wasn't just following him anymore. It was becoming a part of him. Chapter 5. The Final Choice. Days passed in a blur. The mark spread. The whispers grew louder. The shadow no longer waited in corners. It clung to him, a second skin. Ethan knew he had two choices, fight it or give in. He searched for answers, scouring forums, books, anything that could explain what was happening to him. But there was nothing. No stories of escape. No tales of survival. Only warnings. Once it sees you, it never lets go. His last night as himself, Ethan stood in front of his bathroom mirror, staring at the dark, shifting mass beneath his skin. His own reflection seemed distant, hollow, as if he were already fading. Behind him, the shadow stretched, grinning without a mouth. He turned off the lights and let the darkness take him.